We'll welcome in Lloyd Vance on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Does a great job covering the NFL, correspondent for the NFL Network as well. Does a good job as a writer and a good follow on Twitter. All right, let me ask you this, my friend. First and foremost, when you look at some of these games over the past weekend, how shocked were you? We talked a little bit about this Kansas City game going in, but how shocked were you of that outcome with Kansas City against Titans?
Well, Q, nothing shocks me with Andy Reid after covering him all those years. And, unfortunately, they just got way too conservative, sat on their lead, and just could not get anything done in the second half. So, yes, you were surprised, being that they were the home team. They were the favorite. They get a 21-3 halftime lead. You figure they could salt this one away, give the ball more to Kareem Hunt, and they kind of forgot about him in the second half. He did not get his carries. Alex Smith looking average. And I think the key thing, of course, was Kelsey being knocked out of that game. Just did not play the same way. So very surprising loss there for the Chiefs. And it ended up costing me going 3-1 for the weekend. But, it was a good win for the Titans. And the Titans now have a very tough task going to New England.
Oh, no doubt. Do you think Alex Smith played his last game as quarterback with Kansas City?
I do, and you have Dorsey, who is the general manager there, that drafted Pat Mahomes and brought Smith in a while back. He's moving on. He's now with Cleveland, and Andy Reid seems to be enamored with Pat Mahomes, the rookie quarterback. They traded up to get him, so obviously they want to keep him and move him forward as a starter. Now, Alex Smith is under contract for next season, so if they're smart, they'll start looking when the league year starts in early March for a new place for him to go. And maybe by the draft they can pick up a couple picks. But I expect him to be traded and not with the Chiefs next season.
Yeah, you mentioned Andy Reid not running the football, and we mentioned sometimes, we've said this for years, sometimes a coach can just outthink himself. You go to that Buffalo and Jacksonville game, you get the ball right on the 1 yard line after the false start. Again, you got a quarterback that can run, and you got McCoy back there. Even though he's banged up, he ran hard against Jacksonville. How do you not run the ball in a goal line situation instead of have Taylor drop back to pass?
Yeah, I thought that Dennison, their offensive coordinator, who's kind of in question there. They're not sure if he's going to come back with the Bills. He kind of forgot what got him there. And you're right, McCoy, he got out there on the field. He was a little dinged up, but he was ready to roll. And why not to do some kind of, if you're going to run pass option, make sure that you're going forward and not dropping back, and you could get sacked there. But I would give Shady the ball at the goal line. Unfortunately, the Bills, they did get out physical. Let's face it, Jacksonville was not their best, but Bortles found a way to win that game. And then, of course, they won the turnover battle, which was key in that game.
And you're right. And at the end of the day, you just find a way to win the football game, and his legs made up for the fact that he really couldn't hit any open receivers. It's going to be a different animal this weekend as well. Let's get to the Eagles for a moment. And I said during the top of the hour that when you look at the Eagles, listen, we know they're not the same team with Nick Foles, and they lose Carson Wentz. It's just a different animal here. It's a different quarterback. It's a backup compared to arguably an MVP candidate in Carson Wentz. But I believe this game against Atlanta, I have no issue with their interior line. I think they're going to be able to get to Matt Ryan. I think both quarterbacks might get the snot be kicked out of them on Saturday. I think both defenses are going to be able to get to the quarterbacks. But I just look at Foles and that offense, and I think, if anything, this game's got to be won and lost in the trenches, and the Eagles have to control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. Do you believe they should open it up, or do you believe they should try to establish the ground game a little bit, then see if it's there for Nick Foles to take some shots?
Yeah, Q. Now, when looking at this game, preparing for it, I went back to last season when they played in Week 10, and it was more of a shootout type of game. Obviously, Wentz was the quarterback, and both teams were throwing the football all over the field. But you made a key point there. I think if the Eagles want to win this game, they got to make it ugly. They got to make it physical. Let's face it, usually in the playoffs, the more experienced, better quarterback is the one that's going to win. But Matt Ryan seems to have some difficulty when facing his hometown Philadelphia Eagles, 1-4 against them. I covered a game, I remember his rookie year against the Eagles, and he lost at the Lincoln. He got very beat up, as you were saying. I remember talking to him after the game. He's all beat up and bruised, and they're going to try to get that pressure coming up the middle against him. Andy Levitre, their guard, has torn his triceps, so there is some exposure there. And they better get a good game from Jernigan and Fletcher Cox. They got to come up that middle and knock him off the spot. So the interior lines, as you're saying, will be a huge key to this. Hopefully, Peterson doesn't take the lead from Andy Reid, and he feeds Jay Ajayi and Blunt and runs the football to help the Eagles.
Yeah, and going back to your Fletcher Cox comment, I think this is a game where he's going to have to try to wreck the game. And like I said, I think both these quarterbacks better strap on the chin strap because I think they're both going to get beat up. The question is, what quarterback's going to survive? Who's going to be able to run that ball early on? And another thing, too, is when you look at Schwartz's defense, it's so frustrating, but in a positive way. He frustrates the hell out of opponents because he makes these adjustments, and if they can get that lead, and then all of a sudden he pins these guys' ears back a little bit. One of the keys, and I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it, is you figure out a way to get a lane on 3rd and long, and then that's when all of a sudden you can decide, okay, are you going to have Jenkins coming up, safety blitz? Are you going to drop him back in coverage? Are you going to have these edge rushers come around? Are you going to, send some guys, be a little more aggressive? So I think 3rd and long, if they can figure out a way to get a lane on 3rd and long defensively, that plays right into their favor.
Definitely. And Atlanta is going to try to establish Freeman and Coleman on 1st and 2nd down, picking up some key yards to make it 3rd and short. But if it is 3rd and long, the Eagles are going to have to keep an eye on Julio Jones the whole time, making sure that Darby, I think he's maybe shadowing him a bit, keeps an eye on him because they're going to try to get the football to him. Last time they played, he had 10 catches for 135 yards. He had a key drop at the end of the game, but that is their guy that they have to have marked. So they got to get the pressure on Ryan, keep an eye on Jones, and then don't forget about the Eagles linebackers. They got to cover that middle area of the field. They've always had some difficulty there because you have Mohamed Sanu who can get those crossing routes, and don't forget about Hooper. So a lot of keys to this game, but I think the Eagles definitely, their defense is going to have to win today.
You look at that Saints and that Vikings matchup, and again, you got New Orleans that I think their defense bailed out Peyton go for it on 4th down. I just thought it was a horrible coaching decision. But now you have Minnesota that you can argue has one of the best defenses in the NFL. They've overcome adversity as well. They can run the football. You got Diggs, you got Thielen. You got Murray who's running the ball when Cook goes down, and you have a quarterback playing at a really high level. What's your thoughts on the Saints against the Vikings?
Yeah, this is the marquee matchup, obviously, and everybody wants to see this game. If Drew Brees can continue with that pinpoint passing at over 370 yards last week, and he's going to try to drive that football down the field. Now, I don't know if that's a good idea with Xavier Rhodes and Harrison Smith back there for the Vikings. So the Vikings, probably one of the best defenses in the NFL right now. I think they get after the quarterback. In Case Keenum, a guy a lot of people are not sure if he's going to show up, if he's not. I think he has an efficient day. And if they're smart, they're going to lean on Murray and have him run the football with some urgency. So I think in the end, you're going to probably see the Vikings defend their home turf, but this will be a close game.
I think the Patriots, I don't want to spend too much time on the game. They're just flat out the better team. And I think when they have all this type of nonsense brewing in the background, they get ticked off and they make the run. The Jacksonville and the Steelers game is interesting to me because if there's one team that I think can upset the apple cart and beat the Patriots in an AFC championship, that would be Jacksonville. Forget about the quarterback for a moment, but their secondary, their pass rush as well, and their linebacker play. I think this is going to be a really tough game for Pittsburgh, and this is another game where I think, if anything, they are going to try to blitz from the get-go, Jacksonville that is, and really try to just not rattle Big Ben, but force him into some of those mistakes that at times we've seen him make.
Yeah, and I agree with you first on the Patriots. They won 6 straight times against the Titans. Getting to the Jacksonville Steelers game, you're right. They're going to have to make sure that it's a physical game because the last time they played, Jacksonville went up to Pittsburgh in Week 5, and they just balled their fist up and beat up the Steelers. Fournette 181 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, including a very long one. And they run for over 200 yards in this game. So the Steelers are going to try to take away Fournette. They're going to try to get after Bortles and make him beat them passing. Obviously, 8 for 14 is not going to get it done, and he's going to have to hit his spots in terms of his throws. So it's a matchup to me. Steelers defense, if they can beat Bortles and try to get these turnovers, it could turn the thing around. But obviously, as you're saying, that defense for the Jaguars is one of the best. They have just all pros all over the place. Ellis Campbell and the rest of the guys getting after it. So I think it's a very close game, but I think the Steelers may get revenge in this one.
Get a couple minutes with Lloyd Vance, contributing a correspondent, also does a great job covering the NFL Network, and again appearing on the Boardwalk on the Hotline. Rich Quinones here. All right, let's look at the head coaching carousel for a moment. It seems as though the Giants had that sixth and final interview today, but all signs are pointing to Matt Patricia. And I like this as a potential hire because – you know, you look at Shermer and you look at a guy like McDaniels, they failed their first time around. And I know Patricia hasn't been a head coach, but you win a couple Super Bowls with that pedigree in New England. You bring back kind of that old school thinking where offensive line, you play defense, or you run the football. But my question is, when you look at these coordinators, when you hear Gettleman or any GM say, we want to change the culture and we want to have a leader among men, a leader among boys, if you will. I don't necessarily, where do you draw that fine line where, okay, so does that mean you're going to, to me it doesn't matter what someone does as a coordinator. I guess it's my point. If the Giants, for instance, want to bring in a guy like Patricia, who they believe will change the dynamic, the culture, the mentality in that locker room, and bring back that old school Giant ways of football, then to me, how much stock do you really put in with a guy being a good or bad coordinator? Because at the end of the day, if he can't do what the GM's setting him out to do, then it's a bad hire.
Yeah, and the key word for me is the guy prepared. Whether he's coming from a big coaching tree or he's the hotshot assistant, is he ready to take over the reins and be the guy in front of the room, in front of the 53-man roster, and lead these guys, as you were saying? He's got to have control and make sure he's kind of a delegator, but also be responsible for everything. So we saw this in the past. They know they made a bad decision in McAdoo.
Exactly.
Lost control of the locker room. And now if they bring in Patricia, which everything looks like it's going to, like you were saying, he's going to bring that Belichick way of doing things. He's been with Belichick a long time. He'll be a defensive presence, and let's face it, in the Northeast, particularly in the NFC East, you have to have a defensive brand of football. You want to establish that first and foremost, and then run the football. You're not going to be able to throw it all over the place when the weather's bad outside. And I think Patricia, if he comes there, will bring that toughness, that mentality to this team. So, and maybe he'll get Odell Beckham in line and Eli Apple, these guys that have kind of gone astray. But I think they're not going to do this if Patricia, if he's everything that everybody's told me he is, and he's the tough, disciplinarian type of guy, and he's going to be no nonsense.
Were you surprised with the move that the Seattle Seahawks made? I mean, it just seemed as though, again, they still haven't moved on from what transpired a couple years ago in the Super Bowl. So you almost got the sense that it was time for a change with that coordinator.
Yeah, Darrell Bevell was out there, and let's face it, Darrell Bevell had a game plan that was kind of geared around and pass around Brett Favre, and that's not the type of passer that Russell Wilson is. I heard that Russell was doing a lot of freelancing, and they kind of want to bring him in and also bring in somebody that he's comfortable with, the playbook that they're running. So I think a change was needed. Pete Carroll is still going to be there for some time. I don't expect to see him going anywhere. But as you're saying, this roster is in flux up there in Seattle. The team has gotten older. You've had a lot of defections. People get hurt. And John Snyder's going to have to do a job in terms of rebuilding his team, particularly at the offensive line and the defensive secondary. So they'll get a new voice in there. Maybe a guy like Mike Shula, who was just fired by the Panthers and there was that kind of wide-open look on offense, may come in there.
Yeah, I agree. It should be interesting to see what happens. You've already seen some of the changes in Carolina. The Jets might make a change at their offensive coordinator position as well. So everything's still very fluid right here in the NFL. All right, my friend, always appreciate and enjoy the games this week, and we'll talk next week. Great stuff as always, Lloyd.
I look forward to it. Thanks for having me.
All right, you got it, Lloyd Vance.